Welcome to this Sunday, April 6th, 2025. Uh, we want to start by asking you, first of all, let me say that I hope you had a peaceful night. And we want to get started by asking if there are any questions pertaining to anything we've discussed or anything that has come to mind for you.
Um, I like to ask a question before we get into a discussion. We were talking about the cuts and what's going on with the government, and Teresa mentioned someone who she knew firsthand that this had affected. And I didn't know, I've been forgetting to ask her uh, a follow-up how those people are doing. Have they found something else? Are they faring okay, or what's their situation?
Good morning, family. This is Teresa.
Good morning.
Ron, some of them came back, some of them already found jobs. However, we do have another decision to make on tomorrow to take another buyout. And then from that buyout, whether you qualify or not, whether you take it or not, there's still supposed to be a RIF coming either the end of April or mid-May. So the entire agency is still going through. That's the latest feedback that I have.
Okay, thank you. It's just been on my mind and just wondering about them. And again, we're all in this together. You still have our prayer, everybody's prayers. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Yes, ma'am.
In that question, what you had talked about, what did the president mean when he said the strong will survive and the weak will not? I know he was saying something in that right there. In my analogy of what he was saying, the rich will strive and the poor will not.
Mr. Charles, I'm not really sure. What I do know that the federal government is wide and there's several other agencies. So therefore, no one will escape what is to happen. No one. And that means their family, friends, whatever the case may be. But this thing right here, it doesn't just affect African Americans or poor, whatever the case may be. Everyone is in this. Everyone will be affected.
Thank you, sweetheart.
I think
And
part
my
of
sister name is Teresa.
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I think part of what stirs the straw that stirs America is we think people that have the ability to make money are wise, and we think that they're make good leaders, and we follow things and we listen to things they say, and as you yourself said, Charles, that the answer to his question about the strong uh, probably has to do with money. It has nothing to do with any type of wisdom or moral conduct at all. So
Well, that's the Machiavellian principle. Might makes right. Um, the strong will survive. It's also Plato's Republic is philosophical concept of a government that those who are actually those who have no empathy or sympathy for anybody are the ones who should lead. So there's a plethora of concepts involved in this that has its origin in European education. However, um, being affected by it, as Teresa said, does not mean you're going to be destroyed by it. We, quite frankly, have been through far worse than what we are facing right now. And you say, well, I haven't. Yes, you have, because you were in the body of an ancestor who came through worse than this. And that's where all the trauma comes from. However, it doesn't mean that we will be destroyed by it at all. So,
Thank you.
Good morning. I have a question. This is Audrey.
mhm.
It's not really related, but anyway. I was just thinking the other day, and I wondered, did the concept of ancestors morph into the concept of angels? That's my question.
I'm thinking because I'm going back in my mind to the word angel, that actually should have been translated as messenger. It seems to me as though that they play the same role, and that the idea of angel has its origin with Christianity. And the ancestors are messengers, also. So it seems to me that, well, I do believe, Audrey, that you're onto something in equating those two. It's impossible for those who brought Christianity into existence to have been in that part of the world and been in the midst of that Eastern environment and not been made aware of ancestors.
Well, I mean, all indigenous cultures talk about ancestors, 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 and it's only Christianity that says angels.
Right.
So
Well,
ancestors are a really ancient concept.
Christianity, Judaism, and Islam talks about angels.
Mm. Yeah.
So I can see very clearly the connection between ancestor beings being becoming an angel, while at the same time those three talk about ancestral worship is demonic when nobody's worshiping ancestors at all. So it's a disclaimer for what reality is. Everything that gives us a sense of being is declared to be demonic. So I can see that very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. In reference to the inaugural human being, the first human being, if they're the first, did they really rely on an ancestor? And what little I know, the inaugural human beings, they saw their existence through nature, sun, water, moon. So as it relates to the inaugural human being, who did they have to rely on? Did they have to rely on an ancestor? Or, how did they maneuver being the first? Thank you.
Being the first human in the earth, the ancestor was the creator. And by virtue of also being the first ancestor on earth, they recognized their unicity with all of the natural elements, whether or the elements in the universe, the stars, the moon, etc., and those in the environment of the earth. And after the first begun to transition, that simply meant that they became ancestors. And the difference between the creator and the ancestor is that the ancestor is one um, who has, who is familiar with what it's like to live in a physical body, in a physical place, and have relationships with it, and how to move and have their being in this physical environment. The creator, of course, um, had not had not had that experience, and could only experience it through those of us who are in this earth. So, what the creator actually did is brought into existence um, form a body, a physical body for the so that the spiritual being or the spiritual ancestor, the spiritual creator could have a physical experience in a physical realm that it created. I hope that helps, George.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm. Anyone else?
Good morning, everyone. This is George, GC in Philly. Artie, when you were speaking about angels, I thought about, what we have, shared many times when we spoke about the importance of Elohim. And when we look at, the word Elohim, we know that it's plural. But, when I was looking at it in terms of just some of the further explanations of Elohim, it talked about being angels. It talked about being rulers, being judges, being divine ones. And so this takes on that singular meaning when we talk about God, or we talk about goddess, or God-like one, or works of special possessions of God. So when we talk about the primary source of our origin of history, I truly know that it gives us that early foundation to know that it was all written in the term of how we may could look at Elohim, and maybe someone may want to expound on that. But I think that it gives us our beginning. And so that makes me comfortable, to be able to appreciate our ancestors, but just knowing, who were they created to be. So I don't know if that resonates at all with what you were asking or talking about in terms of angel, but to see it in that plural sense, gives me a sense of reassurance to know that it was from the origins of beginning that we came into the knowledge of who we are. I'm done. I want to share those thoughts.
Thank you. What you described actually is, are characteristics of Elohim. When you talk about being judge, magistrate, etc.
Amen.
Yeah. Thank you. Questions or comments?
I have a question, or it might be a comment, but I'm gonna put it out there. Well, I used to hear, people talk about angelic beings. Can you collaborate on that for me?
Yeah. Angelic being is simply an angel. That's all. It's just another way of saying an angel.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I honestly believe, since Audrey brought that up, my mind is still working with that. I honestly believe that when we find in the scriptures where it says that angels brought messages to people or gave them direction, I honestly believe it was ancestors. It was intended to speak of the ancestors, but it was changed to fit the narrative of those who manipulated the sacred writing.
Yeah.
Because it talks about, the angels or Gabriel or whomever sounded the horn. It talks about the angels bringing warnings, the angel bringing messages, those kinds of things. I do believe it was taken from the whole concept of ancestry. That helps, Charles.
Yes, sir, it helped.
Thank you.
Now when Lucifer, now I don't know if I'm saying it right or telling it right. Why he was the angel of praise, and he always worked in the earth, giving praise to God of the people of the earth. I guess I'm phrasing it right. How that right there works.
First of all, the whole thing in Ezekiel that speaks to Lucifer as being the one who they praise, the whole thing is misinterpreted, mistranslated, and if we were to take it apart and really look at what he's talking about, is actually talking about the thoughts of mankind. Is actually talking about the Lucifer means the light, I think it was, so morning light or something like that. But it speaks to enlightenment, but it also speaks to deception. And what we have begun to see is how the sacred writings were used in a deceptive way. So when you talk about Lucifer being at war with the Creator, that makes absolutely positively no sense. You can be at war with who you are internally, but there's no way that you can be at war with the one who created you, because that battle is already lost from the beginning. So it doesn't make sense that a creator would bring into existence a quote unquote angel and not know the personality or the characteristics of it because it created it. So in that regard, it doesn't make sense. However, what does make sense to me is that the adversarial thoughts that we have them for a reason, and the Creator very clearly has told us that it created light and darkness, good and evil. So we have the opportunity to make decisions. If it were not for adversarial thoughts, we would not have the choice to make a decision to seek our spiritual essence, or to remain as we were created from the beginning. So in order for us to be divine, we would have to be able to make creative decisions, and those creative decisions brings into existence not only an awareness of who we are, but it also brings into existence an understanding of the wisdom of having both of these mindsets brought into the earth, if that makes any sense. I guess all I'm saying is that we have to rethink everything that we've been told about Lucifer, the devil, etc., because none of those things are actually beings. The devil is not a being. The devil is a mindset. It is an adversarial mindset. It's an adversarial thought. It is a deceptive thought. Does that make sense so far?
To me, it does.
Okay. Thank
Yes.
I
Thank you.
I want to back up a little bit because I'm not. It seemed like the more we got into this, the deeper it got, and I'm not sure where I am. Audrey asked a question about ancestors and angels. George came back and talked about the first man. Then GC came back and talked about Elohim being plural. So I'm not sure I see the answer yet.
The answer to what?
There's a question here somewhere. I don't know. I'm trying to
Okay. I
understand
thought
this.
you were talking about Audrey's question. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how all that ties together.
Gotcha.
Uh, Especially the Elohim part. What role that plays. Elohim, the one but many. Are those ancestors, or
if Elohim is God, right, Ron?
Right.
And if El is God, rather, Elohim is plural. So we're talking about divine beings. Because let me back all the way up. First of all, the word God does not come close to describing the supreme being that created us. The word God came from gut, a German word that means good. And excuse me, and that is singular in form. A good being is what it's saying. A good spiritual entity. Well, that has no bearing in scripture at all. However, when you look at it through Elohim, what you're actually seeing is a multiplicity of spiritual entities that was brought into existence by a being that is greater than Elohim.
Okay.
So Elohim is the spirit, is a multiplicity of spiritual beings. And when we look at it from that perspective, when we look at it from the question that George raised about the first ancestors, then what we see is these spiritual beings existed before there was a physical body for them. Are you with me?
So ancestors. Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
when the physical body dies, then that spiritual entity that occupied that body becomes the ancestor. Does that make sense?
It does.
No, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. All I'm trying to say is this, that if we start with Elohim, what we see are spiritual beings. And then from Elohim, we see that there are physical bodies that houses one yet many, that houses the many spiritual entities that's in this earth. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when one of those spiritual entities in the earth exits that body, then that one who exited that body becomes an ancestor. And the reason is a difference between the spiritual being from the beginning and the ancestor is because the spiritual being, before it was in that physical body, had no clue as to what kind of experiences it would have in that physical body in relationship to its physical environment. Once it has interacted in that physical body, in the midst of its physical environment, and it exits that body, now it's an ancestor because now it has the knowledge, the understanding, the awareness of the experience of being spiritual as well as existing as a spiritual being in a physical body. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't want to make it too complicated. I don't.
Now your questions are hopefully helping to simplify.
I guess part of it is I remember some scripture, and we talked about the manipulation of the Bible, but I remember some scripture that alludes to the fact that I knew you before you were born.
Yes.
So that's what made me think, can you be an ancestor before you even, are all ancestors have to be born into the earth, or are they part of the spiritual essence of what makes up man anyway?
All ancestors have to have had an experience in a physical body. And the reason I say that is because of the purpose of the ancestors. What do? They make us aware of who we are, give us a clear awareness of who we are, as well as they aid us in traversing this celestial ball called Earth and its experiences. So prior to having been in a body, it is a spiritual being with no experience of what it is like to live in a physical body. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Any questions, comments? Or do you see more to it? Okay.
Um, I have a question. It's going to take you somewhere else, unless there are more questions on this.
That's fine. Yeah, as you said, unless there are questions on this.
Everything we've learned here in the last couple of years, anyway, we've challenged everything. We've challenged everything in the earth, everything we thought we knew, and one of the things that I asked you about on last week when you and I were talking, and you said some things. I want you to elaborate a little bit. What does education look like to us now? Is that we know it's not what we've been taught that it is, but how is that approach now to us? Do we do anything different? If you had children now, would you start teaching them something not at an early age that's different? Would you start telling them who they are, or there has to be with all we've known, all we've come to become aware of, that there has to be something that well just start there and let's talk about it. Education, and what is it really, and how do we go about moving in that direction?
And there's a difference in education. And the difference in education is between Western education and Eastern education, or indigenous education. Let me use it that way. Western education comes from the interactions that our Europeans had with indigenous people. And they took the philosophies and the ways of life from indigenous people and made them mean what they wanted them to be, as opposed to receiving them for what they were supposed to be to them. Eastern education, on the other hand, teaches you how to live life in relationship with the natural environment. And Western education separates you from the natural environment. Western education sees the environment as being enslaved to it, as opposed to the Eastern education seeing the environment and it are one. And it takes both of them to sustain each other. And the Western education doesn't see it that way. The whole idea of manifest destiny speaks volumes about that. When we talk about what we call "quote unquote" modern education, what we are actually talking about is an understanding of philosophies, the understanding, learning how to read is basic, learn how to read and count, etc. That's basic education. But to build on that, we talk about higher levels of mathematics, and we talk about higher levels of philosophy, understanding the philosophy of life through the social sciences, etc. However, those are things that we are taught are antithetical to how we are to live in conjunction with the natural environment. So what we see as indigenous people as education is something totally different than what we have been taught for that education is. As to my children, if I had to do it all over again, how would I do it? I don't know how I would do it. But what I know now, I do know I would do it differently. And the reason I know that is because when my children were growing up, I taught them who they are in terms of being African. I taught them the history of our existence in this earth as well as in this society that we currently live in. Now, before my interaction with Pan-Africanism and African history itself, things would have been different because I would not have been exposed to it, neither would I have been aware of it. So I do believe that that we we teach our children based upon our awareness, the things that we are aware of. And that is one of the reasons I can safely say that uh, my kids are very much aware of their spiritual nature being African, because that's the foundation of being an African anyway. And and as far as the history is, they understand the history of their existence in terms of being African, and they understand that they were not slaves, but they were enslaved, those kinds of things. Now, when I begun to understand that Christianity was not what it was made up to be, I begun to talk to them about it as well. And as the change was coming about with me and my understanding spiritually, they were taught just as everyone else around me was. So now their spiritual understanding, even though they are not on with us at any point that I know of, their spiritual understanding is no different than ours is, because the foundation that they received, they sought to understand what they had received, and it led them in a direction. So now they talk about the universe as
This call
opposed
will
to
be
God.
recorded.
They talk about the universe as opposed to God, and um, they talk about the existence of ancestors also. So all of this is predicated on an extension of what they were taught when they were younger. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the thing about there is no real definition, I think, for education, because, for example, if we talk about education in this nation, then we're talking about people who graduated from school or from with a diploma, with a degree, etc. Right? But when we talk about indigenous education, um, um, I have a cousin. Of course, he's transitioned, but he could not even read his own name, but he could read a blueprint, and there was nothing he could not build. He understood architecture without even being able to say the word architecture. So the question becomes, what is the education, right? What is education in that regard? So it's not, I think one of the worst things that can happen to us is for us to think that if you don't have a degree or a diploma, that you're not educated. Some of the biggest fools on earth had the greater degrees, the higher degrees, and are less educated than people who've never walked across the door sill of school. So our understanding as indigenous people of education goes far beyond a book, or far beyond what we call formal education, if that makes any sense. Because I'll ask the question. I've been reading since I was 3 years old. I've been counting since I was 3. No one taught me how to read. So was I educated? Because I had not gone to a formal school when I started reading. So was I educated? And if I were, who educated me? Does that make sense? Is that a fair question?
Yeah.
Rev, can I ask a question whenever you get done, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
You said a couple of years ago, educated people, and I may misquote what you said, but if you can remember it, you will correct me. Educated people are very predictable, and literate people are unpredictable. And I was looking at my daddy's yearbook for Mather Academy, and I saw what people wanted to be. And some people said brick mason, tailor, seamstress, beautician, and my daddy had down for his mortician. And I didn't necessarily see too many things. Well, I didn't see anything saying anything about basketball or football or baseball. And in asking my daddy that, he just said, you know, that was our secondary option. That was an option. Then I looked at your yearbook, and I think it was Sims, and I saw I didn't see too many sports, and well, I didn't see any sports, and I saw one of your classmates said they wanted to be a public servant. What did you really mean, or could you just elaborate more? What does it mean when you stated, if you remember that, to be educated, you're very unpredictable, yet to be literate, you're unpredictable? Do you remember that, Reb, or you
I
don't
do,
remember that?
but I use different words, but yeah, I do remember. What I was saying is one of the things that I received from my interaction with Reb Hawkins, and that is, um, he said that an educated nigga is predictable. You know what he's going to do. Now, he says the difference between an educated man and a trained nigga. That's what it was. And an educated man, he thinks for himself, he processes for himself. A trained nigga doesn't. And what he meant by trained, it means that those who rely on what they were taught in school, those who rely on what they received from white people as education, and those were his words, because he said that white people cannot educate black folks. In order to educate people, you have to understand who they are, and they don't care about who we are. So to carry that to its further, I'm sorry, to give you the context in which that was said. And that is true to this day. It's a difference between being educated and trained. We have been trained, and we were trained to be a Baptist, we were trained to be Methodist, we were trained to be Presbyterian, we were trained to be Christians, we were trained to be teachers, we were trained to be doctors, but we were never educated in being a doctor or being a teacher or being a mortician for that matter, because the educated doctor has compassion for the patient, and the educated doctor does not seek to use a band-aid effect on what is diagnosed. Educated doctor seeks to bring healing as opposed to masking what the problem is. In the case of a teacher, educated teacher does not teach based on a curriculum that does not fit the students. Educated teacher teaches, creates an environment where kids are encouraged to think for themselves and to process differently than the rest of them. In other words, they're not taught to be clones. They're taught to think outside of the box. If you talk about education, a teacher in that regard. So we have been trained. If you've been educated in spirituality, then what you begin to see is that Christianity is not what it's all set up to be. And what you begin to do is look for sources other than the sources that are provided to you by Christianity. So in regards to the question that you raised, George, this is the context that it was dealt with. This is within the realm of the context that I said that. Okay. I hope it makes sense.
Thank you, Reb. And yeah, in context, yeah. And Reb, can you just elaborate on how was Denmark Tech such a good school for our culture, especially your era? Just Denmark Tech, if you don't mind speaking upon it, or if you know anything about Denmark Tech. Thank you.
Yeah, I know a little about Denmark Tech, but I also know that Denmark Tech was no different than any other HBCU. All our colleges and universities were the same. And the primary goal was to teach us how to function in this society. If you really think about it, what we were really taught was how to how to function in this society, meaning that we were taught how to be schizophrenic. Because in order for us to function in this society, we had to be able to interact with people who literally hated us, as well as interact with people who pretended to love us. We had to learn how to play the game when we were employed by people who pretend that they had our best interests at heart, as well as those who we know they didn't. We function one way with white people, another way at home, and another way with our friends. So in order for us to survive in this environment, we had to be a chameleon. And in our schools, we were educated. There's no question about that. We were taught how to think for ourselves. We were taught the nuances of being Black in America. Even though there was no formal African history taught in our schools, we learned the history of our being in this earth. I remember kids were taught that slavery was not a bad thing at all. Yet in our schools, we were taught the true nature of what slavery was, as opposed to what the curriculum demanded to be taught about enslavement. So when you talk about Denmark Tech and the preparations that were made there, the preparations in our schools were made for survival. Now on the college level, totally, we were different, and the difference was that Lyndon Johnson signed an order for there to be would you check and make sure your phones are muted, please? That a land grant college be established in DC. And that land grant college was Federal City College. And it was different than all the rest of the schools in that the primary goal of Federal City College was to teach us not just who we are in this country, but who we are, who we were before we came to this country, before we were brought to this country, before we were enslaved. So that education was a bit different, and it spread like wildfire around the country, and it became so infectious in the community of Africans until it had to, that blaze had to be extinguished, and they did it by virtue of merging schools so that they could eliminate Federal City and the ideology that existed there at Federal City, because it was created an environment of Africans who did not believe in soliciting their freedom from the government, but taking it by any means necessary. So so when we look at it, we see a mixture. We see a portion of what the system required us to know in terms of education, but we also were taught what it took for us as Africans to maintain who we are, and at the same time be able to function in this society. And I know I've said a lot, but I don't know a simpler way to put it.
So how long was Federal City in existence?
From 1969 until 74, I believe it was. 70, no, I'm sorry, 76, 78, something like that.
Okay.
No, yeah, it's about 78. It wasn't in existence about 12 years, 14 at the max. You know the funny thing about that? I guess if I gave thought to it, I could tell you exactly how many years. The funny thing about that is every African school that I've been to is closed. From elementary school, from primary school to Sims High, closed. Every African school that I went to after I left high school is closed.
That is true.
Every one of them is closed. So Federal City was not open. I know Sims was open for 14 years. And Federal City was not open for many more years than that. So I don't remember the exact year that it merged with Washington Tech, DC Teachers, Federal City, and one more tech school. No, it's Washington Tech. Those schools merged into University of the District of Columbia, which is UDC now. And it was moved out of the accessible community up on the Gold Coast, where in upper Northwest. Any questions or comments about that? Because I want to move in a new direction. Questions, comments? Okay. I want to talk about something, a question that was raised. George, you had something? GC?
Yeah, Pastor, I appreciate you expressing the significance of education, and I just wanted to comment on when we talk about, you had mentioned about the sciences, but when we look at the arts and sciences, with regards to our history and our culture, it talks about the various aspects of the arts and sciences in terms of the communication arts, which spiritually expresses wisdom. And when I was just thinking about the physical science and the social sciences, I think is all part of that evolvement when we talk about agriculture. I know you have spoke about that previously in our conversations, but I think that this was just a part of us being one with nature, that we were able to appreciate the spiritual education and morality of our existence. And so I think as we look at it today in terms of having the opportunity to teach or to be able to share how our culture has played a very important part in terms of our development. I think it's something that we should look at when we talk about the importance of education, because the contents of what we were taught from a Western society, but at the same time spiritually, in terms of the wisdom of going back to that learning, is so prevalent with regards to where we are and where we desire to go. And I think something else you mentioned, was in terms of not so much the subject matter, but the methodology of how we teach. And so again, I think about it in terms of where we are today, or where I am, is not so much, how we teach and learn, but what are we teaching and learning? If that makes sense or resonates. I'm done.
And the what is important, George, it does resonate. It does. And the method of teaching is important as well. UDC was formed in 1977. So Federal City merged with UDC in 77. And it was established in 1968 as a land grant college.
Something I got out of what you said, especially when you start talking about your kids, what I'm gathering from this and using this experience, this meeting on the phone, and before on the phone, we were in our individual buildings. A real education then, to me, carries a vibration. It carries a rhythm. Being trained does not. Being trained fights against your natural energy. So with the vibrations, it resonates sort of like the tree roots we were talking about. It's easily absorbed, it's easily seen. And it doesn't mean that you know everything, or you know how to explain everything, even a concept that you heard. But if you feel the vibrations of it, you got it, and you're able to share it, not so much in the words, but in your actions. And so as we grow into this direction and become aware, the education part will take care of itself because of who we become as we unveil this stuff that's been put over us or in us as we shed it away. It resonates with the universe. It makes it easier for others to see. That's what I think I see anyway.
Yeah, I can agree with that, Ron. I believe education makes you aware of who you are in your environment. However, I would like, if I'm not putting you on the spot, I would like to hear from those who worked in education, especially, to see what your thoughts are in regards to what has been said about the difference between education and being trained, or education itself. I don't want to call your names, but I would appreciate it if you would speak to that. Now, I will call your name, but I don't want to. So,
I guess I'm on the spot. Well, when I think about my time in education, and I compare what I was doing versus what the curriculum is, what the curriculum was, it was night and day. The curriculum was basically teaching a sociocultural, I was laying a sociocultural foundation for what I guess to meet the narrative of what certain people thought education was about. And it was basically about training people for a supposed job market. It was definitely not about teaching people who they are or to help them become who they are. So I guess I'm saying I agree with you that it's just a way of training people to be something or other, not necessarily helping people become what they are meant to be. But I only ever, in my curriculum, I mean, in my career as a teacher, I only ever taught Montessori. I mean, I taught regular school for 1 year, and it made me definitely know I did not want to teach that. And in Montessori, the aim is to help the child basically become who they are meant to be. And it's through allowing them to express themselves respectfully. It's allowing them to explore things that they are interested in. And then also there's an element of peace education, meaning that when children get into conflicts, they have to sit down and talk about it and work through it. It's not left to fester or it's not done in a way that quells the situation and gives the teacher some supposed peace. It's actually done in a way that children are made to talk out what the problem is and come to some resolution. And if they need a mediator to help with them with that, then there is a mediator present. If they can do it on their own, then all the better. So children start to see each other as worthy and as an individual, not just as an other, but as a cared for member of the community. And the whole classroom is like a community. I used to tell my kids all the time that we're a family. These are, we function like a family in this classroom. Even though, this is not your real brother or sister, but we function like a family. And you can get mad at whoever or whatever, but you're gonna have to work it out. So children are able to come to a place where they realize that they are worthy. And they come to a place where they realize that that conflict doesn't have to be the overarching, what word am I looking for? The overarching concept that comes into play when you're dealing with other people. So I guess I agree with what you were saying, that real education is different from just training somebody to go into the workplace.
Can I ask a question?
Anyway, I could say more, but to get all my thoughts together, I've been out of it for a while.
Audrey, a lot of what you explained sound like the Dagari tribe that we studied, remember? Or we talked about the community aspect of it, the problem resolution.
Yeah, there's some of those same concepts in it. Yes. Mhm.
But you said something. How did you get, you said that you sort of, and these are my words, but it sounds like you sort of created your own curriculum, that they allowed you to do that.
To a degree. There is a curriculum, but the curriculum itself, there's math, but the curriculum is far more expansive than what people would get in just regular school, because we would get, besides math, science, language, they would get history, geography, they would get, in depth. If they were interested in exploring something, they could go as in depth as they wanted to. And it wasn't just performative. It was, if they were really interested in something, then they had to produce a product. And that product would be like, either they had put together a PowerPoint or write an essay or put together some sort of, and then present it to the class. So, so nothing was performative. There was always some sort of product that had to be produced, that was then shared with the class, which was a way for the other kids to learn everything that that particular person had learned too. So there is an established curriculum, but it's much more expansive, and it allows the child to go as far as they want to go in a particular subject.
Wow. What grade did you teach?
And I'll give you an example. when I was teaching, about angles, the various type of angles, I was walking down the hall one day and I heard a teacher tell her class that, you know, there's more angles than this, but because of South Carolina standards, I'm supposed to teach you these 2 or 3, and that's what you're gonna get, basically. And I'm like, whoa, because I was, when I taught those, my kids got the whole, in Montessori, you give them the global perspective, and then you start to specialize. So my kids knew everything.
Yeah.
And then they were able to focus on what they were really interested in. So anyway, that's one example. There are a whole lot of others.
Yeah, but Audrey, I appreciate what you're sharing because you're talking about holistic learning. I mean, sometimes people are just taught partial aspects of their,
Exactly.
their development, but you're actually, teaching in terms of just the Cushite and the Kemetic teachings in terms of just your spirit, teaching your class. And I think that that's, where we are today when we talk about the importance of, I say the communication arts, because it spiritually expresses wisdom, whether it's through the performing arts, as Ron, you talked about, as far as vibration,
Yeah.
looking at the kinesthetic movement of a particular child or being where they movement expresses in different ways, but building on their strengths, building on their skills. And so again, from the physical science, I mean, in terms of the physically demonstrate, I mean, physical science physically demonstrates wisdom. And I think in all that we're discussing and what you shared, I can really see it being pertinent for right now. And I think that we need to look at how can we be effective in our teaching from a methodology standpoint, but at the same time still covering the contents of what, have been taught years ago when we talk about the origin of humanity. I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject there, Artie, when you were talking about the holistic teaching that you were doing. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing I left off is we also teach economic geography, which is talks about, like, where does bread come from? So when I taught that to my class, we go through a series of things about of them, where does bread come from? And then we walk it back all the way from the table to the farmer and all the steps in between. And then there are a series of lessons there. And then at the end of that, the kids are able to, anyway, what I did was they were able to call up a business on their own. They had a little coaching about what to say and how to say it and all that, and what questions to ask. But they called up a business and they set up an appointment to go talk to a manager or the owner or something, so that they could learn more about how that business was established and what goes on in the business, and how do you start a business like that. So they were able to just go through the whole process, and how that affects them in the future, I can't say exactly, but they are starting at a much better place in terms of the kinds of things they want to pursue, the kinds of things they will have initiative with, that sort of thing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank all of you. There are a couple other people I know who worked in education as well, who's on this line at this moment. Would you all give your perspective?
I guess, good morning, Grand Rising family. This is Kathy. I guess I'm like you now, Audrey, so I guess I really need to speak up. And a lot of what Audrey was saying, I saw that I worked in different school systems and ended up working the majority of the time in the Rock Hill school system. And though we didn't have the Montessori approach, we were actually, like we said, preparing children for jobs. And a lot of what Audrey said, Rock Hill school system does that. I mean, they even go as far as when she's talking about what we call career day, what Audrey was just describing. They even, from 6th grade, I was in middle school, 6th through 8th grade, you were preparing that child and identifying a career cluster. By the time that child got to the 8th grade, and we had a job fair, a career day every year, but they were actually picking a career cluster and then pick their high school courses from that career cluster, and they had to go and interview people and actually go to the job. We gave them one day out of school, and they would actually go to that job and be with that career person the whole day to learn about that job. So I'm thinking, as I think back, all the different things that we said about education, I do believe it trains you to fit into a particular setting. That is what it prepares you for. But a really good teacher will go beyond the norm. So one thing Rock Hill would do, if you were identified as quote unquote gifted and you were off the charts in the curriculum, they will hire a special teacher to just come in and teach that one child so that child could not be held back. I'd never been in a school system that did that before. A lot of everything else that Audrey described, we did in regular school setting, but of course you're going to have a lot of teachers who are going to teach that curriculum based on South Carolina standards, and they won't go beyond that. But for the most part, most teachers, a good teacher, will find ways to incorporate and expand that curriculum and not hold that child back. But as the counselor, I saw the behavioral aspects. It is to me, education is a very defined set of principles, and you adhere to that norm to fit in. When you don't find your place and when you cannot see how you fit, that's when the system is designed to kind of work against you and work you out of that system. And so as the counselor, my job was to one-on-one pull those kids and work with them and help them to see who they are, to see their potential, while not losing sight of who they are, but also learning ways to fit into a system that will work against you if you don't learn how to get the benefits. I can remember saying so many times, so you do not particularly care for that teacher and you do not particularly care for how this teacher is talking to you. Let's let your parents handle that. You don't handle that by talking back. You need what that teacher is giving you to be able to go to the next class, to the next grade. Let's find a way to get that information, utilize that information moving forward. But let's also work on dealing with how that teacher may be dealing with you or how that teacher may be talking to you. Let's let the adults in your life handle that. As far as conflict resolution, what Audrey described, we have that in every school I've ever been in, also in regular education. But most of it came from the counselor's office. And what I mean by that, we identified children who wanted to be who wanted to work on conflict resolution teams and to be able to come in, and we trained them how to work with other kids to mediate conflicts when conflicts arose. As the counselor, we only guided. We wanted the children to learn how to resolve the conflict, because I said many times, when you leave middle school, I will not be with you. You won't see me, so you won't always need to come to Ms. Smith. You have the innate ability inside of you to know how to solve this. Let's process and be able to do that. So we taught the kids that while other children were trained to lead conflict resolution and mediation. Our schools were set up as teams. Each grade level had teams, and each teacher, there were 3 to 4 teachers per team, and that became their own sense of a little community within itself. And a lot of times the teachers would, as a team, sit with children when something was going wrong, especially if a child was having a problem in one teacher's class and not the other members on the team, then that was a red flag. What's the conflict here between the dynamics of that child and that teacher? And so they were brought together. They would sit as a team and work together sometimes, many times, before it landed in my office where we had to work to resolve it. So the reason I loved working in Rock Hill, they were very innovative because, like I said, they didn't necessarily, they were not equipped to just say, you learn in this way. And although we were pulling the best from you and trying to get you to just go and grow in your own way, while of course having to adhere to the curriculum that had to be followed. But like I said, they didn't hold the child back. If you showed tendencies of moving, and that's a whole nother animal of how you identify gifted and talented children per se. I don't want to get into that. But when they saw that was beyond the scope of what that grade level teacher was teaching, I can remember having to coordinate schedules because I had the luxury of having my high school as my feeder school next door to us. We coordinated schedules with the high school that a child could walk over if you were an 8th grader and you needed 9th grade science or math or whatever your area of expertise and giftedness was in. You took that at the high school level. And I did that every year that I was there. We'd have multiple kids walking over at different points during the day to go ahead and start on their high school curriculum. And so, but to go back to the original question, education as we know it, the Western European education is a very defined institution of beliefs and norms in a system that you're supposed to fit into. The problem comes in when you can't identify yourself in that system, when you don't see yourself, when you don't see how you fit. Then the system is designed to work you out of the system so they can move on peacefully and quietly without your child. And so, of course, I had many, many, many problems with that and spent 39 years of my life making certain that children never lost sight of who they are and their identity and what they needed from that system. Glean what you need from the system, hold true to your identity and move on. But as far as the curriculum itself, good, very good curriculum. It did allow for kids to move at their pace and move forward, but it's just the institution itself that can either make you or break you depending on how a child comes into that system, how that teacher, and teacher perspective has a lot to do with making or breaking, how that teacher looks at that child and determines and that mindset of that teacher moving forward. That is a lot of what I dealt with for 39 years, explaining to teachers, everyone is not going to come in your classroom and sit and be that perfect ideal student that you think you prepared for when you were in teacher training. And now that you've got real life circumstances, you've got to be flexible enough to meet that child where he or she is and to help bring them forward. And so many teachers were okay with that and would work with you. But what I loved about Rock Hill is, especially for new teachers, they had a 2-year mentoring program for that new teacher. And if you did not show yourself to be a strong teacher, an advocate for children after that 2-year period, they thanked you for your 2 years of service and told you maybe education was not for you and you needed to look elsewhere because you were not a good fit for the system there. I like that because they made you more accountable to whether or not you were writing kids up and putting them out of your classroom all the time. Then you had to meet with the superintendent and the counselors twice a year to justify not only your grades, not only your test scores, but your whole discipline approach as a whole. And it was brutal. I felt for some of the teachers that came through. We had to develop notebooks of everything you had done that year as the counselor up to the point of that meeting, present that to the superintendent in advance. And then you had to sit in and justify your approach to how you were teaching these kids and what your expectations were and why you were or were not meeting those expectations. So that was a little bit different from any other school system because I've been in Union and Spartanburg and other systems, but that was just something that I encountered there that I really liked. So I guess to go back to the original question, yeah, education as we know it does train you for a career, trains you how to fit and assimilate into a society that would deem you acceptable if you know how to fit in. And I think that's all I want to say right now. You kind of caught me off guard, so I had to think about it because I've been out of it now for 5 years, but that's what I saw when I was working. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank both of you. Are there anyone else before I say what I want to say about this?
I just have another little comment. This is Audrey.
Mhm.
I think though, U.S. schools are exceptionally a problem. Because based on what I know about European schools and even African schools, although there are some politics that influence education to a degree, there's nothing like what happens in the US. With all the political and religious stuff that is heaped down on educational districts and systems. And I think that is part of the problem. Plus all the racist overtones from rules from years past leading up to now that kind of kept people in a certain track for whatever, like this thing they do. If you can't read by third grade, then they basically say you're on a track to go to prison. And that's like incredible to me that they can decide right then, instead of deciding that they're going to go in there and help this child not be in that situation. So I think it's US schools in particular, and more so in the South, schools are set up to be controlling, suppressing individuals, not allowing you to think for yourself, all of that. So it is a real problem in the US.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well,
Speak for
The US school,
see,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going
Well-
to speak from, well, I just want to say something briefly, just from a parent's point of view that has had to deal with many obstacles within the school system. And I can kind of piggyback off of what Kathy mentioned, is how I don't know if I'm saying it verbatim, what she said, but basically how they basically want to push them out if they don't understand the child, and just not trying to understand the child. My son had a very traumatic first year of middle school. He was so excited about going to middle school. I was so nervous. He was bullied as soon as he got to school. He was in a fight on day 6 of school. But the problem is nobody ever wanted to admit that it was bullying, because it was, of course, a white child that was bullying my son. And he wasn't the typical bullied child. He didn't just crawl up and ball up. He fought back. But then he mentioned that he was being bullied. So long story short, after that, he was targeted. Always did very well in school, but he had some difficulties. So if it hadn't been for Reverend Richard and me being able to have the resources that I have, out of all the years I've known my child and knew him for who he is, they actually started making me question who he was and who he was becoming. So I had the unfortunate, well, I'm not going to say unfortunate because it's been a blessing, but I switched him to a different school, same situation. And that really made me question, my son. But and when I would hear his version, he would make sense. It would make sense. And I would even talk to the principals, and they would even agree that he made sense. Nobody could understand why the teachers were this way or that way. Well, I had a conference with one teacher, and her initial approach to me was, your son is special. He is a leader, and I can really see him going places. So I listened. But after that, I explained to her what my issue was with her. It immediately switched. The principal had to end the meeting because this woman was being so aggressive with me. That was the aha moment for me, is that they put on one face for you, but they are approaching your children to oppress them when they have them alone. So I made the decision to pull my son out of public schools. He is now and was immediately all A student. He just took a standardized test that blew me away. He scored 77% above most students his age and nationwide. He's in the 7th grade, and he tested on a 11th grade student in their 6th month of school. So I say all that to say that I just wonder how many other children that look a certain way, they want to put them in a certain box, how many of them have been so oppressed, and it brings so much drama to their parents, that they have missed out on, like you said, who they are and who they could become. I'm just grateful that I have the foundation that I have to recognize the gifts in my son, and to also recognize and be able to articulate that I know what he is and what he is going to be. And I put that, I establish that in him. I speak those words to him all the time. And he has just flourished at home. I often wonder, is he missing out on the interaction of kids? And Reverend Richard assures me, nope. I had to remove him from the chaos for him to even believe in himself and to realize how much potential and how smart he is. But being in the school system and being barked at and, like you said, written up and pulled out of class, and he was never going to, I knew that they were just going to make his rap sheet a mile long so that the paperwork would reflect him before anyone could actually see the attributes that he could contribute to society. And I explain that to him, and he understands. And I tell him, even when we went before the board, all they kept saying is, wow, we're not used to seeing these type of grades, you know. And I explained to him, I said, you see how that paperwork represented you before you could even step in the room. So I agree that the school system does not teach our children who they are. They already want to put in them who they are. And that is detrimental to the child. But I just wanted it to share that. And I thank you, Reverend Richard, 100 times over.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, that's what I meant about the racism and the politics and the so-called Christianity being involved in what goes on in schools. It's a mess. It's a real mess.
Let me see if there's anyone else before I say this. Okay. Since 1974, especially in the Department of Education in Southern states, they have used psychologists to determine how they were going to teach African children as opposed to European children. And it may seem far-fetched to you, but it's a reality. If you look at the history of special education did not take root or become a major part of the school system until 1974. And it became a major part of the school system because psychologists show them, meaning teachers, white teachers especially, how to remove Black males from the classroom and put them in special education, even though they should not have been there. What I've heard from Audrey, what I've heard from Kathy, is African teachers making sure that African kids be taught. That's what I've heard. I have not heard from them anything that was positive about the European educational system. But I did hear about the ingenuity it takes in order to make sure our kids are able to navigate a system that is designed against them, that is designed for failure for them. Why are we talking about this today? I think it's imperative that we do talk about everything that we discussed, and this in particular, because this is a determining factor in how our children navigate this society and how we cut against the grain and make sure that we close the pipeline from school to jail. That pipeline was open when private prisons came into effect. That pipeline was purposely put in place in order to make money for those who own private prisons. And I say to you today that the majority of our children who drop out of school do it because they're bored and because they're always bashed. They're always accused of things that they are not involved in. I talked to a couple of people I know, a couple of guys in particular, and both of them at one time were drug dealers. And I said to both of them, but one in particular, that if you can sell drugs, you can run a business because of your the methodology that's involved in operating and being a drug dealer with inventory, employees, etc. That person now owns a business that's probably he's been in this business for about what, 2.5 years maybe, and already his business is exceeding $300,000 a year. Now, what is he doing with that? He's not using that to say I'm successful. He's using that to help other kids, especially males, move out of the streets into a place where they are able to make a living for themselves and their families. Why am I talking about this? Because this is not about getting rich. This is about being rich. This young man helps these young men move off the streets and show them their value, because public school does not show our children their value at all. It robs them of their value. It matters not whether you're college educated. It doesn't matter. When you look in the mirror, you're no different than anyone else who looks like you when it comes to this society. Audrey talked about the difference in education in Europe and Africa and in this country. This country is the most racist country on the face of the earth. And some of you would say, well, that was South Africa. South Africa was overtly racist, but guess where it learned it from? Guess where they learned it from? This country. So Israel is functioning today based upon apartheid in South Africa. Apartheid in South Africa was based upon racism in South Carolina. So this country is a major exporter of racism. And that is the reason that we are based in this country. We, meaning those of us who are the vanguard of this of change. We're based in this country because this is the birthplace of overt racism. This is the place where the European barbaric mindset began to what hide itself or justify itself, or began to become more sophisticated. This is the most sophisticated system of racism that the earth has ever known. Is there racism in Europe? Of course it is. Yes, it is, most definitely. But America is different. America is different in that America is indicative of the European when he came out of the cave out the Caucasus Mountains, killing each other, having no regard for life at all. America is indicative of every bit of that. And you say, well, why are you here? Because the Creator brought us here for a purpose. The Creator brought us here for a purpose to bring this place to its knees. And I don't mean its knees so it will pray, because it's not going to pray, but bring it to its knees so we can uproot the foundation and lay a positive foundation for humanity to flourish. We are at the precipice of that right now. And when I talk with you, I was going to do it today, but I'm not. But when I talk to you about the idea of being a scapegoat and the idea of being Nebuchadnezzar, you will see exactly what I mean when I talk about this being based in this country. What I mean by based in this country is that we are a spiritual force of warriors who have been placed in this landmass in the midst of the most racist people on the face of the earth for the express purpose of bringing change for the whole of humanity. And in the process of doing so, having a desire to bring those along with us who are racist and choose and desire to change. But those who desire not to change will perish. And they will perish. And what I mean by perish, it doesn't necessarily mean they will leave the face of this earth, but they will live to see not only the error of their ways, but they will suffer in kind. Right now, we believe because we have been indoctrinated to believe it, that money keeps you from suffering, but it doesn't. Money does not protect you from suffering. And as we spoke earlier about everyone, Teresa, I think mentioned that every one of us are going to feel an impact from what's going on, and we will. But it does not mean that we necessarily have to suffer. Suffering is a state of mind as well, sometimes as a state of being. But we're in a place now where the African in this country is calmer than he's ever been in the history of being in this country, with all of this stuff falling apart around us. And at the same time that we are sitting in this country and we are just letting things fall apart and everybody's calling for us to help them, and we just sitting this one out because it's necessary for those who think that their whiteness and those who think their brownness has protected them. And I'm talking about Hispanics, I'm talking about Palestinians, I'm talking about Europeans who think that the color of their skin protects them because they're not dark like us. Now they're feeling the wrath of it. And when it's time, we will bring deliverance to all of them. But it is not time for that yet. The other part of that is this: while everything is falling apart here, Africa is taking off like a rocket ship. Leadership is beginning to take over the countries, and they begin to establish themselves as to who they are. And I'm saying to you that our whole discussion about education today has brought us a greater awareness of the burdens that we must bear, has brought us a greater awareness of how much ingenuity we have as a people for us to be in an education system that is designed to destroy us, but it has not been able to do that and never shall be able to do that. So with all of you who have spoken today, I encourage you not only to continue to speak out, but I also encourage those who have heard us today to hold on to what you've heard, to embrace it, because everything that has been spoken of today that is beneficial to humanity resonates deeply with the universe. And universal resonance is what brings about a unified change in the earth. We are in this space that we are supposed to be in at this moment. And there are those who have been chosen, who have been brought into this earth to be leadership in this spiritual war. And they are just now beginning to realize it. The covering is being pulled from their eyes rather, and they're able to begin to see that they are not who they were told they are. They're beginning to see that they are who they were created to be. And it's incumbent upon us to continue this journey that we are on. And as I listen to Alexis talk about her son, and there are thousands others, 10,000s of others like him, who have been pushed to the side or have been made to feel like they are not worthy of being even in society that's long living on this earth. So I leave you with this today. I encourage you to stay the course. I encourage you to understand that there is no way that you were created in this earth to be a vanguard for spirituality, and at the same time, the one who brought you here is going to allow you to be destroyed. That's not going to happen. And again, you will see the reason things are difficult for those of us who are traveling this journey. When we look at the idea of what a scapegoat really is. So I wish that you would enjoy the rest of the day, but also that you never forget that you were brought to this country for a purpose. We were enslaved for a purpose. We were put in this space for a purpose. No one has endured what we have endured and still are able to forgive those who did it. No one on earth. Everyone else seeks revenge, but not us. So go in peace, go in love, and we see you tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. And again, thank all of you for your presence today, and every one of you who spoke and those who gave your energy to our discussion, our meeting today. Be strong. I'm done.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.